I think Nima and you briefly touched on it, direct EB-5s, trying to control your own money versus trust a regional center with it. I'd like to hear from you. I mean, starting with Anu, what has your experience been? What's been, the proportion of direct EB-5s versus regional center EB-5 petitions at your firm? And then also why people choose one over the other.
Sure. So I'm going to approach this like I would with a consultation for a person who's interested in EB-5, doesn't know if they want to do a regional center, doesn't know if they want to do a project. Unless you are in the business of creating a company, and unless you've had experience running a company, I am loath to tie your immigration status to you attempting this for the first time. And the worst I've encountered are people who are not physically present in the United States, who trust a friend, family member to run their business in the US while they're waiting for their 526, the first part of the EB-5 process, to be approved. And then they come into the US. And I'm not saying that they committed any fraudulent activity. It's just simply the record keeping wasn't done. And so it becomes so much harder to do a direct investment. So unless, again, if they've had experience running businesses overseas and now they want to run a business in the US, makes sense. If they've never done it before, I hesitate to say this would be a great option for you. The other thing is, for the people who are in the United States on an H-1B or an L-1, I run into the issue of, are you authorized to work for that company? Because a lot of people here on an H-1 say, hey, I want control of my money. And I get it. It absolutely makes sense. It's a lot of money to be investing, but you also need to make sure that you're not running afoul of any immigration laws by working for your company when you're not authorized to do so. For those reasons, I generally tend to prefer regional center EB-5 to directs, again, unless you have that experience. At our firm, prior to 2012, the majority of our cases were direct EB-5. So I think, as Nima mentioned before, that's really where the trend was until the economic downturn and until we saw a real boom coming out of China. Around 2010, 2011, 2012 is when we started seeing the shift to regional centers, where clients were more interested in, going the regional center route. They didn't want to worry about creating the business or documenting the job creation or the expenditures themselves. And so they much prefer that option. And that's kind of been progressing, or actually stayed the same throughout the last 10 years or so. In 2019, I did start seeing an increase of people who were interested in pursuing a direct investment, especially after the investment amount went up. People were wondering, if it's 800,000, should I start creating my own company? And that can maybe give me profit at the same time as a green card. What I've seen thus far is what I've been saying for the last 10 years. Unless you're in that business, it doesn't make sense for that to be your EB-5 investment. I tell clients, if you want to start your own company, feel free, do it. Start your own company and then make a separate investment for your EB-5 if you're going to go that route. I am very uncomfortable, especially when I see 20, 21-year-olds starting their own new commercial enterprise while they're in school. I have huge concerns about their document retention. The reason why people like direct versus regional center, again, is they believe they have more control of the funds. They believe they have more control of the approvability of their case, which may not necessarily be true. The reason why people prefer regional centers is because I feel like they've understood what their limitation is. They know that the regional centers are going to be the one responsible for documenting the expenditures, keeping track of the job creation, and they get updates either on a quarterly or a yearly basis. So control and the perception of approvability is what kind of shifts people one way or another.
Thanks, Anu. Nima, question for you. It'll be great if you can get into what is required to set up a direct EB-5 investment. So if I'm a prospective investor, I'm deciding between regional center and EB-5, and I'm seeking your advice, what will it entail from a legal standpoint to put together an EB-5 petition?
Yeah, I love that Rohit is speaking last. So let me try to cover everything in this topic. So he has nothing to do. Expanding a little bit, if you don't mind, on what Anu said. So if we're looking at overall filing numbers in EB-5, they skew really heavily to regional center versus direct. 97, 98+% is regional center and direct. And when there's a few factors in going into that, one of the main factors is how jobs are created between a direct and a regional center. And this goes into the documents that you would be preparing for one versus the other. A direct investment is what we know as an operating business. It's for someone that wants to establish a company in the United States. They want to own and operate and manage their business, and they want to hire US workers. We tend to think when we say hiring US workers of people, but what you're actually doing is creating 10 plus full-time positions. Your business, in order to survive and thrive, we're rhyming very early this morning, you need 10 full-time positions at all times to operate. Now, those 10 positions could be filled by one or more people. A very good example of this is if you ever walk into a Subway, it always looks like nobody is working there, but a Subway is open 7 days a week, 3 shifts a day. So there's probably 20 plus employees working at that Subway. Lends itself very cleanly and neatly to the EB-5 direct investment program. The direct investment program, in terms of the documents that you're submitting for approval to USCIS, is actually not that extensive. The lifeblood of the documentation you're providing is a business plan. That business plan lays out in great detail what your goal is at the business, what your strengths and weaknesses are, what your timeline is to ramp up and hire employees. There's not an expectation that you have 10 employees on day one. You are starting a business, you are injecting cash, so you are able to ramp up, but you do need to lay out that timeline, and you need to provide a pro forma to USCIS to show that based on your projections, this is actually a viable business. And in doing so, you need to show that you've established yourself. So not only is your company registered and you have the business plan, but you have a lease for the premises, you have the furniture and fixtures needed to build out the office. If you require permits and licenses, you have that. You have marketing materials. The difficulty in a direct investment, and this is what Anu was saying, is that USCIS is not a great organization. Processing times, I think, and I've always said this, are the biggest impact to the EB-5 program and the number one thing that needs to change. It is very difficult to operate a business for 6 and 7 or 8 years profitably, maintaining employees. It's a huge achievement in the United States. And that is the timeline that you are looking for in a direct investment to get your green card. Certainly if you're not from a backlogged country. If you're a Chinese national that moved forward with a direct investment in 2016, you still have not even seen 526 approval. And so going back to what I said earlier, the reason that people skew towards the regional center is in a direct investment, you have to create and maintain W-2 jobs. So that means the 2 years after your conditional green card is issued, you file the 829 for the 10-year green card. What you need to prove is that you created and maintained those direct jobs. In a regional center, jobs are created based on spending money, typically hard construction cost, a project going vertical. When that money is spent, the jobs are considered permanently created. So really quick example, if you start a Subway and it takes you 8 years to get to the 829, well, you need to evidence you maintain those employees for probably 7 of those 8 years, and they're still on payroll when you file your 829. If you invest in a hotel and job creation was on building the hotel, even if the hotel went out of business before you file your 829, as long as it was built, the jobs were there. So for investors, it becomes this decision of, okay, well, even if the project is not financially successful in a regional center, I will get my green card. But in a direct investment, if it is not financially successful by year 3 or year 4, I've lost my money and I've lost my green card. And I think that's a poison pill to swallow. And the other thing is that investors that are not familiar with the EB-5 program, they are often put in a position where they need to make business decisions that will help them grow that may be adverse to the EB-5 program. So going back to the subway example, you may open and then realize that the foot traffic or the lunch crowd is not what's needed to sustain. And you know that if you move 5 miles away, that is the perfect location, and you will be able to survive and you will be able to earn a great living. That 5-mile move may cause denial of your application, may cause withdrawal of your application and a refile. So these little things put you in these terrible positions. And because of that, the direct program is just not as popular.
Thanks, Nima. Rohit, coming to you. I know you file both kinds of petitions, but I would love to get your thoughts on why more than 95 or 97% of the applications are filed with regional centers, and what's the kind of work that regional centers put behind a project before launching it and raising capital for it.
Well, like White Shirt was saying back there. No, so he covered. I mean, Nima covered everything there. I think, look, let's see. There were certain changes under the new EB-5 law. The first thing is the expense to actually raise the capital, right? So prior to the new law being implemented, a number of folks would actually go out and raise money from relatives. They could have 2, 3, 4 people, let's say building a hotel, a very common process where they'll say, I've got a $12 to $13 million Hilton Garden Inn or some other Marriott branded hotel. It's going to cost me, X amount in hard construction costs. I don't want to rent a regional center. I don't want to go down that route, but I've got cousins and close family friends that want to invest with me, and they're each going to give me the sufficient capital. I, in turn, am going to be responsible for creating all the necessary jobs, and I commit to creating 10 full-time W-2 jobs for each person. Now, what the new EB-5 law has done is it's taken away our ability to pool more than one investor. So it's really just a standalone concept. And so this is only going to work in a standalone component if A, the project is not very expensive, but B, at the same time, also is going to create the necessary number of jobs. That's very difficult to do. You will need some level of threshold to have operational basis. You still need to actually employ people. The most common sort of EB-5 direct, if you will, is in the fast casual space. And if you look on that hospitality bent, the fast casual space is also a very difficult business to run. COVID really taught us just how difficult that was. And so you look at that example, you look at what happens, and as Nima was mentioning, trying to operate a business for the next 8 years and still maintain that type of employee base is very difficult. So most people have learned, they've seen the failures that have occurred. And, I'm not saying that direct is not the way to go. I'm saying that you have to be very, very cautious, as Anu actually had mentioned at the start. So as investors have gotten more savvy and there is more publication out there, and they notice that regional centers actually do operate quite well, and, present company included here in this instance, having a brand name and having longevity within the industry, having lots of successful projects, that is what is going to give the investors trust, because they know that somebody is actually going to run the fund efficiently. They know that somebody is actually going to ensure that jobs are created, the money is being spent, and they will keep all the records. The new EB-5 law, which is the EB-5 Reform and Integrity Act, has really raised the bar as to what the requirements are. So regional centers have huge amounts of compliance restrictions that they actually have to adhere to. The funds have a lot of compliance restrictions they have to adhere to, and the borrowers in some instances also have to do that. So when the senior lender is lending the capital, we know that the path of the money, the EB-5 money, has to follow certain parameters, has to go through certain accounts, and all the records are meant to be kept. So I think the gradual shift over time has shown the investors confidence, and that's why they're beginning to go that path, number one. Number two, there are also all of these other elements that are created by the new law, which, visa categories, which we've not discussed so far. You've got rural, high unemployment, and then infrastructure. To say from a direct perspective, for example, rural, you are going to create a fast casual development within a rural setting, and you're going to employ 10 full-time W-2 jobs. That's a little bit difficult. Versus if you have a regional center that's doing, for example, a hospitality development, and we're going to get to count the construction jobs. So those type of elements are propelling investor interest because they see, hey, rural gives me some level of priority. I want to go for that. Or they see there is a certain number of set-asides that are in high unemployment TEA that's attractive to them, and they like the asset class, and they also like the job creation, and they like the regional center. So I think from that perspective, we are going to see, and we have seen, a huge shift. In terms of demand, pre-EB-5 Reform Integrity Act, and when I say pre, I mean prior to June 30th of 2021, when the EB-5 program did reset, we were noticing about 6 to 7% were favoring the EB-5 direct, and then there was a period where the only EB-5 direct was in there. But now, at least within my practice, I'm seeing pretty much 98 to 99% are regional center, and only a 1 to 2% want the direct.
Thanks, Rohit.